In a world where entire countries thrive on access to the world's oceans, Jordan stands as a striking outlier. With a landmass of over 89,000 square kilometers, this ancient nation controls just 26 kilometers of coastline along the Red Sea, one of the narrowest maritime slices for any country its size. That sliver has outsized consequences, not just economically and politically, but even emotionally, shaping Jordan's sense of place. Did you know that Jordan's tiny stretch at Aqaba is all that keeps it from being completely landlocked? How did a nation so steeped in history end up with such a limited doorway to the sea? And just how much has this shaped Jordan's destiny, especially when neighbors like Saudi Arabia and Israel control vast, strategic coastlines? Today, we unravel the tangled story of Jordan's Red Sea puzzle and the real price they've paid for it. Let's step back to the late Ottoman era, when Aqaba was little more than a modest fishing outpost perched on the northern tip of the Red Sea. After the First World War, Britain carved a new political reality out of the ruins of the empire. One result was the Emirate of Transjordan under Abdullah I, but the borders Britain drew in the 1925 Treaty of Hadda granted the fledgling emirate a mere 8 kilometers of shoreline. That thin ribbon mattered greatly. It gave Amman a literal lifeline to maritime trade at a moment when regional railways and roads were primitive or non-existent. The boundary line was anything but natural. Colonial officers sat in map rooms thousands of kilometers away, drawing straight segments that ignored tribal grazing lands, seasonal caravan routes, and mountainous wadis. Abdullah accepted the deal, reasoning that any port, no matter how small, was better than none. Yet, from the outset, the strip was too narrow for future growth. Steep hills boxed in Aqaba's coast, leaving almost no room to build docks, warehouses, or even access roads. Even then, traders were forced to queue ships because only a single pier existed. Every delay added cost. Every cost echoed northward in the price of bread in Amman. This coastal sliver also injected early geopolitical anxiety into Transjordan's politics. The emir knew that losing Aqaba would put the British-supported state at the mercy of rail lines through Palestine or Syria. Thus, the Red Sea frontage became more than geography. It became a question of survival, of sovereignty, and of identity. That urgency set the stage for every decision that followed, including a gamble 40 years later that would permanently alter the map. You see, after 1946 independence, Jordan inherited borders that Winston Churchill allegedly drafted one Sunday afternoon, a boast historians later debunked, but that captured the arbitrary spirit of the era. Those lines mattered when the 1948 Arab-Israeli War reshaped the neighborhood. Jordan took control of the West Bank, but still owns only that fragile finger of coast. The Six-Day War in 1967 then stripped Amman of the West Bank altogether, deepening dependence on Aqaba's tiny harbor. At the same time, Israel's Eilat, Saudi docks at Jeddah, and Egypt's Sinai ports expanded, underscoring Jordan's tight squeeze. Jordan watched enviously, boxed in by mountains and old boundaries, its population doubling with Palestinian refugees, but its sea gates unchanged. Every kilogram of phosphate mined in Man, every sack of wheat imported from Australia funneled through the same aging pier. By the early 1960s, shipping agents complained that Aqaba's waiting times averaged 4 days, twice regional norms, driving up freight premiums by as much as 15% on Jordan-bound cargoes. Infrastructure money was scarce, and Amman's planners faced a brutal equation: either expand seaward or negotiate more land. That dilemma propelled King Hussein toward bold diplomacy with Riyadh, wagering desert for water frontage. As tankers lengthened and global trade containerized, Jordan's leaders feared the country would be locked out of the maritime revolution. You, standing in modern Aqaba today, can feel that tension in the city's narrow grid and crowded shoreline. It is history compressed into concrete, and it explains why King Hussein rolled the dice in 1965, chasing a bigger slice of sea. The stakes were high, and the bargain that followed was unprecedented. In August 1965, King Hussein and King Faisal struck a land swap treaty that stunned diplomats. Jordan ceded about 7,000 square kilometers of remote northern desert. In return, it gained 6,000 square kilometers of interior territory, and crucially, an extra 18 kilometers of Red Sea shoreline, tripling its coast to the current 26 kilometers. That new coastline now hosts over 85% of Jordan's maritime facilities. Overnight, Aqaba's waterfront frontage stretched southward towards the Saudi border, finally offering space for new quays and an industrial zone. Why did Riyadh agree? Saudi Arabia coveted contiguous control over caravan routes in Wadi Sirhan, while Jordan prioritized maritime access. The swap also included a clause to share potential offshore oil revenues, a forward-looking incentive that sweetened the deal. But a new coast meant new expenses: dredging, breakwaters, customs sheds, security posts, and a highway to Amman now crossed rugged sandstone. The kingdom borrowed heavily, and foreign advisors flooded in. Some early investments stumbled. The first container crane in 1978 broke down for lack of spare parts, but steadily, infrastructure improved. By the 1980s, phosphate exports from Man rolled downhill to Aqaba in hopper wagons, filling bulk carriers bound for India and Europe. Yet limitations persisted. Even after the swap, Jordan's coastline narrows to barely 1.5 kilometers at its thinnest point, squeezed by steep hills on one side and Israeli waters on the other. One storm or closure could paralyze trade. In effect, the gamble bought breathing room, not freedom. Breathing room mattered, however, once Jordan entered the container age. Today, Aqaba's cranes glide over stacked containers, lifting 100-ton loads thanks to a new $13 million upgrade unveiled in 2025. Even with that upgrade, the port remains a tight funnel. It now handles roughly 80% of Jordan's exports and 65% of its imports, according to logistics analysts following an AD Port investment deal in 2024. The numbers reveal dependence. Container traffic jumped 41.5% in January to February 2025 alone, surging from 50,729 to 71,827 boxes. Such growth is welcome, yet it strains roads and warehouses clustered against the mountains. The World Bank's Logistics Performance Index still rated Jordan at only 2.96 out of 5 in its most recent published score, well below Gulf neighbors with sprawling ports. To keep goods moving, the Aqaba Special Economic Zone offers investors a 5% corporate tax rate and duty-free status, drawing over $20 billion since 2001. Yet customs brokers complain that a single road accident on Highway 15 can delay truck convoys for half a day. When the Houthis disrupted Red Sea shipping in 2024, economists estimated Jordanian import costs rose 7% in a single quarter. Small in global headlines, large in a country where fuel already eats a fifth of household budgets. With no alternative port, Jordan's exposure to choke points like Bab el-Mandeb is higher than many landlocked nations. Jordan's confined shore magnifies every regional shock. That real-time fragility is the hidden price tag of geography. Which brings us to politics, where every wave laps at questions of sovereignty. Jordan's leaders learned early that secure passage is as vital as a physical coastline. The 1994 Wadi Araba Peace Treaty with Israel explicitly fixed a maritime boundary in the Gulf of Aqaba and affirmed free navigation for both sides. For Amman, the treaty guaranteed that Israeli patrol boats would not cut off the entrance to the port, a risk that haunted planners since 1967. Relations with Saudi Arabia carried different stakes. Oil pipelines cross Jordanian territory, and Riyadh's vast coast gives it leverage over regional shipping lanes. Any diplomatic chill, like those following the 2017 Gulf crisis, triggers jitters among Jordanian importers wary of trucking bottlenecks and land crossings. Meanwhile, Egypt's control of the Suez Canal adds another layer. A blockage there in 2021 spiked freight rates that Aqaba could scarcely absorb. Internally, Aqaba has become both a jewel and a headache for policymakers. It attracts 2 million tourists a year with coral reefs and winter sun, yet industrial exports share the same key as dive boats, forcing strict scheduling. Naval officers train in a bay barely wide enough for maneuvers, limiting ambitions for maritime security roles. The port is Jordan's economic heart, but its constricted anatomy keeps the kingdom's strategic pulse rate high. Aqaba's geography also limits fleet expansion, complicating Jordan's naval ambitions in regional security alliances. Put simply, every diplomatic handshake, from Tel Aviv to Riyadh to Cairo, has a shadow shaped like Aqaba's shoreline. Without friends, that 26-kilometer sliver can feel smaller than a sandbar. So how is Jordan trying to escape destiny shaped by a map? Well, look toward the horizon and you will spot breakwater extensions, digital logistics hubs, and proposals for an undersea fiber link that will piggyback on cargo wharfs. The Aqaba Container Terminal concession now runs to 2046, with plans to berth 400-meter supercarriers the moment dredging deepens the channel. Authorities trumpet a record cargo of 7.1 million tons handled by August 2024, a figure unthinkable before the 1965 swap. Yet expansion costs money and land. Engineers carve new plots from the mountainside because the seaside is full. Environmental delays are nothing compared to the sheer physics. There's simply no room left on the coast. Some planners quietly consider bonded depots in Saudi Arabia linked by rail, effectively renting coastline abroad to cushion peaks. Others push for a dry port near Man, connected by double-tracked freight lines, shifting container stuffing inland to ease congestion. All solutions carry bills counted in billions of dinars. But the question is, how much is a kilometer of coastline worth? For Jordan, history shows it is worth treaties, treasure, and unrelenting vigilance. The kingdom has poured investment, diplomacy, and national will into turning 26 kilometers into an artery that feeds 11 million citizens. But the bill keeps arriving in higher freight premiums, in defense budgets guarding narrow waters, and in the political balancing act of living beside larger, better harbored neighbors. Jordan's 26 kilometers by trade, tourists, treaties, and tension. In the Middle East, geography isn't destiny, but it's a stubborn negotiator. If you could redraw that line, would that change everything? Give us your take in the comments, tap that like button, and subscribe so you never miss our geographical revelations.